There's so much going on, and we're going to get started second, but so much in the news today, and I just got caught up with that, and here we are on our final night
of a really very important series. I was looking back over the titles. I think they'll be revisited at some point.
Yeah. And if not, we've done what we're supposed to do as community organizers, to make people aware. And our intent was to make sure that people are getting the information. So we've done our part. And I want to say we've not really started formally yet, but this is just a beginning for us.
Yes, and they, of course, are available on your site, on our site. So that's a good thing, too. They're never really gone.
Right. It's 7 o'clock, it's 7:02. We're going to get started because oftentimes we run very close to the time. And
always.
I'm going to be sort of like the Baptist preachers or preachers, period. I ain't going to wait till the crowd gets here. I'm going to start on time. If they missed it, they can go on the line and get it. But I do want to say, I want to welcome those who are with us presently. Nicole, thank you for being on. I think there's some others that are there. My name is Dr. Willie Miles. I'm the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children Foundation located in Atlanta, Georgia. I do want to say that our mission for the foundation is making children our priority. So everything we talk about from henceforth is about children. We're talking about the social justice, and people say, well, how is that relevant to children? It's quite relevant.
Wow.
We're talking about saving a generation. And so it's important that the general audience, that the general community be aware of social justice. And what does that mean? Because Jackie, it's amazing to run around and talk about social justice when you have no idea what it means.
That's true. And also to have a question about how social justice affects children. I mean, not just when they grow up, but you're talking about their parents, and it literally affects every part of their life. Actually, like safety,
introduce
education.
Yourself. We started right into this thing. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Hampton Clemens, African culture and history enthusiast and educator.
All right, so folks, just a few announcements. We're just so excited about what's happening with the organization. And since Jackie has joined me as co-host, I think she's sort of like signed on for all of our live streams. I think she'll be a great addition to us, and she has been a great addition to the social justice series. And I'm telling you, I just love having you here with us. And of course, we'll still be having guests on, but I think that you and I should take this thing and move with it. And what I'm talking about is kind of premature, but Jackie, I'm gonna give people just a little taste of what we're planning.
Please do.
I am so excited, folks who are listening, that in January, Jackie and I have decided that we're going to the organization is going to actually do some funding. It's very small funding. It's called community seed funding. And we're going to offer two $500 mini grants. And those mini grants are going to be focused on social justice. And so anyone can apply for it. We're not going to give you a whole bunch of red tape. We're about getting projects that can be spread throughout the communities, and we like them to be virtual, whatever. And we'll do the specs out around probably in the early part of December.
Right.
Again, we're not gonna make it very difficult to get these funds, but it's gonna be two $500 mini grants. And then we thought about a way to engage young people, and we're talking about college students. And there are many YouTubers out there. So we're gonna offer 5 $200 mini grants to YouTubers. And what they have to do is actually develop YouTube videos, 3 to 5 minutes on social justice. And we'll give you more specifications on that once we get those out. But I was just raring to get that information out. And I do want to share, as more funding come in, we're going to do more of this. So here we are today. We're talking about 2 $500 mini grants and 5 $200 mini grants for YouTubers to actually do something about social justice and making the community aware and giving us a plan as to what they're going to do. Now, we're not expecting people to jump through hoops for this amount of money, but we think it's at least a seed money. And as more dollars come into our organization, we're asking people to match us, because our goal is to become a funding entity.
I think it's important that you mention that. I'm not sure people are aware of that part of the foundation, but it is to fund, as you mentioned, efforts in the community. It is about awareness and broader awareness. So I'm happy that you've shared that already.
And the good thing about it, we're not waiting on anybody to do this for us. We're not saying we're going to wait till the government fund us, because wait for government to fund us, we never be able to do this. These are by private contributions, and we're just very excited about it for those who've donated to us and those who are going to donate to us. We're looking at becoming a funding entity, and we're going to call it non-traditional. We're not talking about jumping through a whole lot of hoops and red tapes and trying to prove a bunch of stuff. We want to make sure that community folk who are grassroots have an opportunity to be a part of the organization. And of course, this is throughout the United States. So we'll give you more information on that as we go forward. The t-shirts are still available. They're going great and amazing. Jackie, guess what? People have actually begun to wear the shirts and post them on their social media. So you'll be seeing more come from us also on social media about the people who are wearing the shirts. And we got like about 6 states who are wearing them now. I know we have Mississippi, we have Florida, we have North Carolina, we have DC, and we have New York.
I love that. And you have all the major cities.
Yeah, so we're
so that's fantastic.
Very excited about that. But before we get started, I want to ask you, how have you felt about this series?
Myself, I've been completely excited about it. I always felt that there was a void in our conversations. As you know, my husband at one point had Black Talk Radio, and when that went away, it's like, where do we have conversations?
Right.
So I think, we've tackled the subjects that people don't necessarily, want to talk about, but I think that's why they're important. So I've been very excited about the series. A little sad that it's, that this particular series is coming to an end, although I know we have some other great things planned. But I do want to just thank you for inviting me on to be part of it. And I look forward to everything else that we're doing. And yeah, I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I want to tell you, we're going to do another series on social justice, and it's not going to be in Black History Month. We're going to do it. We're going to do it on a month that is not technically identified as Black History Month.
Right. We celebrate Black History 12 months of the year.
And I do want to share that to my non-Black followers that, folk, we're very inclusive, and we have many topics that are not just dealing with social justice, but dealing with our wide array of issues that our children face. And I'll just recap some of those. We dealt with child abuse, we dealt with child trafficking, we dealt with children who are in families, the child was gay and the parent kicked them out. We've dealt with mental health issues. So our portfolio is pretty large.
Virtual education too.
Exactly. We're doing a bunch of stuff, folks. So again, don't sit there and say, oh my God, all they talk about is Black stuff. This is a series. Work with us. This series is 5 parts, I think. Am I right?
Yes. And Dr. Miles, social justice really is for everyone.
It really is.
It affects everyone. And of course, it crosses color lines. I mean, obviously some are more impacted, but it's for everyone. Yeah.
And I wish, and I'm really hoping and praying that our community, I'm talking about our broad community, diverse community, could become more accepting and more engaged, not tolerant, but understanding. Yeah, but understanding why this is so critical. Because if Black folk are uplifted, you are uplifted. But as we talk about this, people said the same thing about the civil rights movement. But guess what? Women were part of the civil. They benefited from it.
Probably
Black
more
women,
people of color. It's been
exactly. The gay movement benefited from it.
Of African descent, right?
The gay movement benefited from it. Right. I mean, so it's not just about Black folk, and I feel kind of like strange saying this. It's like, why always got to defend ourselves? Why we always got to clarify, to make sure that we're appeasing people? But we're really about educating people. All right. So tonight's topic: a right to equality. A right to equality. And and Jackie, jump in at any time, of course, because I'm a talker. I just try to figure out, as I was doing the research on this, I said, why? Why do I have to do a statement of the right of equality for Black people? I mean,
despite, of course, the history that says there is a right to equality. And as a matter of fact, despite a history that says there's more than, in terms of contribution to society. Right. It's not like we're asking for a handout. Just look at the contributions.
We have a right to it. But I look at this and I keep saying, well, white people don't have to say, I need a white right to equality.
Ever.
And I'm saying that, well, for Blacks to have to say that, it's like, do I have to?
Of the absence of.
Exactly. And you find yourself asking yourself, why am I having to
Always.
fight this battle? Why is it I'm having to tell you why I'm important
In
and then
2020, in 2020.
convince you that I'm worthy of it?
Mm-hmm. That the human life matters. And
But you know,
that's my new calling card.
right,
It's, of course, I support Black Lives Matter, but
right,
that's not why my life is important. My life is important because I'm a human being.
right.
So why are we doing this still? Why do we have to fight for this right to equality?
But you know, and everybody talks about the next generation, right, and trying to do a better world for our children and all that stuff. I'm saying, like, well, but which children are you talking about? I mean,
Hello.
what? I mean, when you say we're trying to make this world a better place for our
For your
children,
children.
who is
Right. The
our
children who
children?
already have privilege, the children who are already enjoying, I don't want to say things not necessarily earned and deserved, but certainly enjoying a life of privilege. Who are we making it
Exactly.
better for? Because
You
in many
know,
ways, we're not making it better for those who actually need it to be better.
but you know, when you look at the underpinning of everything that's happening in this country, we also look at that there is a strategy behind it. And as we began to explore news daily, and it's not fake news, and began to explore history, we began to see a strategy, gerrymandering and ensuring that, you know, that Black people always stay poor. Yeah, I'm talking about, you know, whereas I'm talking about politically and legislatively, that there's no way we can ever get ahead in a group, because if the same people are deciding our destiny.
And also, we mention frequently that slavery was normalized.
Hmm.
This country made it normal to own a human being. We can see some of those patterns happening now. We want to normalize open bigotry. We
Hmm.
want to normalize taking the lives of human beings for no reason at all. And we want to excuse those that do it. So we are on a really dangerous trend right now as it comes to the right to equality. And that's why these conversations are so important. You can't just let them go. We need to bring this to everyone's attention, and we hope our audience will be a part of bringing it to everyone's attention.
But Jackie, you know, I've been fighting this battle, and I don't mean like I alone. I really have been fighting this battle for over 35 years. And
Very easily.
I find myself now at this age I'm saying the same thing I said 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And still fighting for children and disenfranchised children, and children who are being marginalized like every day. Yes, still 35, 40 years later.
I mean, it's just, and then you have to think about, well, how could it happen for 100 years? But Jackie, I'm almost 100. I mean, you think about it. I've been fighting this for 35 years.
So you have to start asking the questions, where's the real resistance? Why is this country still fighting this battle? And what are the real strategies and steps that are going to move us forward?
Well, I think we know the why.
We do know the why.
It's all about economics. It's about, and I'm not knocking capitalism, but I'm saying that when all people don't benefit, I don't see why anybody should benefit. I mean, I just don't understand why. Exactly. I just don't understand why, 10 people are the richest in the country when we got people starving. Mm-hmm. And it's nothing about their human capital that's preventing this. It is a system. And when I hear people talk about there's no systemic racism, got a problem with
how anyone could make that statement is always amazing to me. To not see what, I don't know how anyone doesn't see it. And certainly if the deaths of Black men and women over the last 12 months, 24 months, mm-hmm. 3 years, if that's not proof enough, right? If you can die in your home, in your bed, and it be no one's fault, what other proof can we offer that our lives have been marginalized?
Well, we're talking about tonight a right to equality. And I thought we should, first of all, just break that thing down to define what a right is and then what is equality. Let's put that together and let's talk about it. So, audience, I want y'all to join in with us for questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer the questions as you input into this conversation. This is not about Jackie and I just talking. It's about you all getting the information. So this really is all about you. But before we get into that, Jackie, I have to keep saying this. My life work has been about children. Mm-hmm. My life work. Mm-hmm. All my writings are about children. And it breaks my heart to think that kids have been born They've been born 20 years ago, Jack, and I see these grown people now, and they are suffering from the same vestiges of racism.
That you were trying to protect them from
the
40
kids,
years ago.
Exactly. Kids who are 12 years old, who are now 40, gone to jail. There's just all kinds of stuff. And it breaks my heart because I realize it's not just them. And some of them are dead. They're dead doing what they thought was necessary to get them ahead.
Yes.
All right. So let's start with the definition.
Okay. A right. A morally good, justified, or acceptable.
Let's talk about that.
Morally good, justified, or acceptable.
Chuck, what's so interesting, though, as we look at this thing, and you and I talked prior to the show, is that, we're both intellectuals. I'm almost insulted to have to define this.
I mean, what can you say?
I am just
That's a very good point.
I'm insulted. It insults my intelligence that I have to define what a right is.
Right. Absolutely.
And
on such a level that it can be difficult because it should be so innate. So to have to define something that is almost like defining breathing.
Exactly.
Something simple.
Right.
Like, do we have to define this? But we do. We do.
But what's so interesting, though, and the next word gets me to it, is morally good. So if I have to define it to people, that means that they ain't morally good.
Right. But then they are the ones who are considered, who have the right to equality. Yeah, there's a whole lot of,
let's breathe for a second. Let's just breathe. It defines it as what's morally good. So,
justified.
In our society, I have to teach a community
what's morally good.
What's morally good. Now, the question I have for you, does it mean what's morally good for whites versus what's morally good for blacks?
Well, maybe that should have been added.
And is there a difference in morally good for the two groups?
Right. Well, clearly. I mean, there shouldn't be, because it should be about humanity, but clearly there's a difference in what it means for two groups. And then the other issue you have here is the irony of having to explain it. Okay, you're explaining morally good to a group that clearly is not morally good, or
but they're not aware of it. They're not aware of it because they normalized it.
Okay, I can accept the normalization.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I say that. I say that because if I were to ask them, and let's just be very specific, and we're not talking a gangster group, we're educators. If I ask white people what is morally good, they could tell me. Now the question is, if I were to ask them to define what's morally good for black people, would they say the same thing that's morally good for whites?
Right.
Are you with me?
Of course. Well, and let's not forget, because you and I, of course, had this conversation too. The entire country, our culture, is kind of founded on miseducation. They have been taught what they've been taught. They didn't make it up. I mean, it was made up, but they have come up believing what society, perhaps their families, told them is the norm. And we still teach in a lot of indirect ways that people of African descent are a subculture. We are a little less than human. So when you talk about your rights, like you said, it's based on what? And which group are we talking about?
Well, it's interesting, though. I actually taught ethics, college ethics, and we dealt with what is moral. And we talk about who decides morality. And we know that morality and values are determined by a group that says it's by race, religion, cultural mores, and family and spirituality, right? So my only point here is that morally good is a universal principle. So there should not be any delineation between morally good for whites.
But it is not universally consistent.
But it's not.
Right.
It is not.
It is not universally consistent. You mentioned spirituality. And we have to remember that many of the systems and practices of the enslavement industry
Mm-hmm.
were backed up by religious doctrine and principle.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you've got an extreme irony when you're talking about morally good and enslaving humans. And
Yeah.
what's morally good for one group versus the other group. They did all of that as morally good people.
Yeah.
And they are generally now accepted as morally good
Very
people.
good.
And then the conditioning says that we are generally accepted until we prove otherwise, if we can prove otherwise, to not
Right.
be morally good.
I always talk about how you look at life is by how life has treated you.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you look at it through a certain lens. So if I am privileged, I'm going to look at morally good through a privileged lens. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not, I'm going to look at it from another lens, which it could be spiritual, it could be whatever I'm accustomed to doing. The next word in that right, a right, is justified.
Again, a lot of irony here, okay? In the mere definition, how does one justify, right, the dehumanization of a human being? How? And for economic gain. Uh, you know, so yeah, you have to look at the history of the country, and of course, economics is an economic gain, not being against capitalistic society, as you said, or a capitalistic principle. But when you go so far as to use humans to achieve it at all costs, then perhaps that's too much of a cost.
Well, but y'all looking from another, and I'm agreeing with you. But I gotta justify a right. I gotta be justified for you to treat me right. I gotta justify it to you. I have to tell you that you ought to.
But see, Dr. Miles, then that kind of presupposes that once you tell them, they're going to say, "Oh, okay, I didn't know." So I'm not sure you can tell them what they don't want to hear. Do you
Well,
understand?
that's part of justification. You're supposed to give some proof. And my question is, what more proof do you need?
Right.
One, I'm human. Two, just read our story. We built
Right.
this country.
We built this country.
Who was the person who said? I think it was an athlete, and I should remember this. And it was profound. He says, "I don't understand why Black people keep loving a country who does not love them back."
I just recently saw that. Yes, a retired athlete. I can look that up for you.
So, audience, y'all know that. Please type it in for us. It said, "I don't understand why Black people keep loving a country
that
who refuses to love us back."
And as we pointed out last week, we are also one of two populations who are still within the area of their abuse and enslavement. We still live in the cities, the towns, the communities. Some people live in the exact same land on the land that their ancestors were enslaved.
Exactly.
So to that extent, we also haven't escaped physically
and psychologically.
And psychologically, of course.
We talked last week about why is it the southern states are still entrenched in slave mentality and are not having right. And so we said that the more the concentration was in those southern areas, of course, the vestiges of slavery still exist and it has not gone away. But as we talk about this topic, I'm really concerned about you and I as adults and as scholars can talk about this, but how does it really affect children? How does it affect our next generation? And Jackie, we have this campaign to save a generation. That's what this is all about. It's not about just talking about, Black and white. It's about how to survive this thing and your obligation to help your brother out and to share and to, that, in other words, the old mindset that says, I've not made it until you've made it. Are you with me?
And that, of course, comes with an understanding that someone did that for you.
Exactly.
Right. So it's not, a question of generosity. It's a question of payback.
Yeah. And we're still people. We're still just on definitions. Our topic tonight is a right to equality. And what Jackie and I want to do was want to break the word up. What is a right? And we want to define equality. And we're going to piece this together for you. Then the other part of it says, and it's a right is defined as morally good, justified, or acceptable. And accepted. So we find ourselves in this quandrum of still trying to talk about, why is it I have to get you to accept that I have a right? Why do I have to convince anyone that I have to convince you to accept that I, as a human being, as a Black human being, have a right to good and all the things that you enjoy?
150, 4 or 5 years after we ended slavery.
Yeah.
And so again, it starts to make even time seem irrelevant. Like, what can we not get done in 100 years? We just talked about 30, right? How long you been on this? 35, 40 years. 150 years later, and we're still having to explain that we're human?
Don't go Conway on me now. I mean, Kanye on me talking about how he can understand why we were enslaved 400 years. Something must have been wrong with us.
Right.
So,
no.
Don't.
Must have been our choice. Must have been our choice.
You
know that long. It must have been your choice. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
But then they did come back later and explain that there's some issues there.
Of course. We define what a right is. Now we're going to define what equality, and that's the whole topic of what we're talking about tonight. A right, what's morally good, what's justified, and what's acceptable. Jackie, deal with equality. Just define that for us.
All right, take a deep breath. The state of being equal. The state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. I mean, it's almost like this word was created just for our experience. The state of being equal, especially in status, in rights, and in opportunities. That word is key.
I got to stop you for a second. Doc Rivers, thank you so much. He says another good quote from a famous athlete, Jalen Rose, was this: "Without Black lives, America would not." Now, Doc Rivers, you better stop that now. You're trying to cause some trouble on this live stream. Without Black lives, America would not matter. Now, I'm not gonna let Doc Rivers get me off track now, because that's real good. That's a whole hour conversation by itself.
Or more. No, so many things come to my mind.
It's a 4-part series by itself.
What is America without its music?
Right.
Okay, yeah. and so many other things. Let's not go there.
Let's not go there yet. All right. So the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, opportunities, and I'm going to say finance. But you know what's kind of amazing though? It's amazing that we look at this definition, and some folk want to call it socialist.
Oh, equality rights.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. A right, a morally good, justified, and acceptable for the state of a being to be equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities.
Okay, so I have a question then. So is it socialist that they haven't?
Don't say that now. They've been shut my live stream down and have us targeted as socialists. Well,
I'm saying, is it socialist that they have?
Part of socialism says that everybody ought to have what everybody has.
They all got it.
And the problem with that is that it totally conflicts with capitalism, because capitalism says that everybody has the same opportunities. But no, listen, everybody has the same opportunities, but everybody doesn't have the same opportunities.
Okay. Right. So we're not.
So of course, it's according to who puts the definition out there.
Mm-hmm.
Who puts the definition out, and who it benefits, and who it benefits. Mm-hmm. So here we are tonight, Jackie, talking about a right to equality. Yeah. And I feel kind of like it sounds like elementary. So I hate to go to let's talk about what Black people invented. I mean, they already know that.
No.
I can't. I look at Jackie. I know they don't. But I look at the White House, for instance, and I said, the folk who built it ought to be called the Black House.
Hello.
The White
You
House
know,
is
I did some more research, and after we go through these, there's more.
mhm,
The White House, of course, is one of the most famous.
right.
But did you know about Wall Street?
Yeah,
Did you know how Wall Street got its name?
come on.
Okay, Wall Street was named after a wall that slaves built in 1653, and in the 1700s, that area housed one of the largest slave markets in the country. So, but Wall Street, I mean, again, irony where that is the last thing we would connect with slaves. And it is
Well,
an American institution, you just said, or Doc just said to us, without Black lives, America wouldn't matter. So you got the White House, you got Wall Street, and of course we have some more.
well, there are many across the country, especially on the Eastern Seaboard, and these were designed and developed before 1861. So
Mhm.
our whole, my question is, again, not really a question, it's really a statement, is why is it that um, in literature and in history, this is not said? I understand the why, because we shouldn't expect an oppressor to liberate us. So I understand that. And our schools should not be left to tell our children this. Our families ought to be teaching our children these kind of things, which
Are
builds
they still our
self-esteem and
oppressors?
builds pride. Hmm?
Are they still our oppressors? I mean, do they see themselves as that?
Well, they don't see themselves as that. They see themselves as our liberators. And
As
because
morally just
don't
people.
forget, because racism doesn't exist, and there's no institutional racism. So of course, and nobody
They're
oppressing you
just
but
morally
yourself,
just people.
because you have the same opportunities as everybody else, and you don't have anything because you're lazy.
Right. The bank is going to loan money to you the same way it would loan it to anyone else.
Well, I can
Right?
answer
You're
that.
going to get a job the same way anyone else would. Right.
I can answer that question for you. I can answer
We
that
all
question
can.
for you.
We
It's
all
kind
can.
of it's kind of amazing that, and it's regardless of what you get in life and the status you get, the education you get, and money,
Yes.
you're still going to be seen as not having a right to equality. And it's not said overtly; it's said covertly. It's said, it's built into systems. That you don't belong here. I don't care how much money you have, and you don't most certainly don't belong in our neighborhood if we got these, three and
You
four.
you
Huh?
don't qualify.
Yeah.
That's the code. You don't qualify. Why not? We'll send you a letter. It just goes on and on.
Well, and you don't qualify, and you don't seem to be quite the right person, especially if you're confident in who you are.
For this opportunity.
Yeah, if you're docile enough and you're, yes, sir, and I'm good. You ain't got to worry about me. You're burning your house down. Now, I'm not saying burning people's house down. My point is that
You have to take me to church,
I'm
so
making
you
a
don't have to,
point
you have to
that
back up.
if you're threatened by me, of course you're not going to help me. And threatened by me simply means my blackness. I don't have to do anything to threaten you. I can just show
By
up.
awareness.
I can just
You're
show up.
threatened by basic awareness.
Okay. A right to equality. A right to equality. So we have a right to what's morally good. We have a right to what's justified, and we have a right to what's acceptable, and we have a right to equality. We have a right to the same status and the state of well-being, and we have a right to opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And what's amazing about this, some of our cousins would say, well, you don't have a right to nothing that you ain't worked for. And I said, why? Others do. What do you
Right?
mean work for? I have worked for it.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it everything we do
You
has to be
worked
so?
for it. Your
Yeah,
parents worked for it. Your grandparents worked for it. Your great grandparents worked for it. Yes.
it has to be so. Everything we do has to be so sacrificial.
Yes.
And it just amazes me. But again, as old as I am, nothing amazes me. We talked about labor, about Black slaves, what they built, and not only Black slaves, but Black people in general. You check. I found one guy. Um, um, he was an African slave who actually did a whole lot of great work, and I thought about what he did based upon what's happening right now,
Mm-hmm.
and he discovered or did inoculations, and in other
Okay.
words, that if someone was infected with something, he'd get their scratch their blood and put it on a person who was not infected, and it would inoculate them from getting the disease. Are you with me?
Wow. Yeah.
And he shared that with slave masters, um, um, It's Onesimus, who shared this with slave masters back in 1706. He said you could deliberately introduce smallpox to the healthy individual, making them immune.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we call that today vaccines.
Exactly.
Amazing.
But no one, you know.
But no right to equality here.
No right. It ain't justified because y'all ain't did nothing.
And why you want freedom? Why you want equality? Why do you think you should be considered the same? I'm not even going there. Right.
But you know, it's kind of amazing to me how when you
Why
look at
why do these lives matter?
But you know, it's amazing to me when you look at our history, we are a great people to survive such oppression. We survived it, and still many are not hateful.
You and I were at the same place. I was saying, survived it without hatred in our hearts, which I don't know. Does that make them more afraid of us, that we don't hate the way they do?
We survived it.
The way some do. I always want to qualify that. Yeah. To survive it at all is really one of the most amazing stories in history.
But how do you survive it? But how do you survive it and succeed your oppressors? Except financially.
Mm-hmm. And even where you have examples of those who have succeeded many financially, they still don't have the right to equality.
Right.
So it really isn't even about the money. Of course, that's one of the things they use to oppress you, the absence of or denying your access to these streams of development. But even with it, the bottom line is the right to equality is something that must be taught and understood as a human element. And until we as a country realize that, the human element in all humans, we will suffer with these injustices and racism, and you and I will be defining the right to equality.
Well, I'm gonna go to a very dangerous territory, but I'm going there though, and that is, but the question is, so then do we serve the same God then? And I'm talking about
that's a loaded question, isn't it?
I'm saying through Christianity and religions.
Of course.
Blacks and whites are in worship service on Sundays.
Does God,
and Bible study and the book, I'm minister, so the book teaches morality. So I'm just trying to figure out, is it interpretation? Does the Bible say that blacks should not be equal? I'm just trying to figure this thing out.
Well, I mean, you did use the word interpretation, and of course there are interpretations, and a little bit of research revealed that, of course, the Bible that was given to the enslaved had a whole lot of passages removed. So yeah, it has been taught as, again, this is one of my points. There's what was taught to the enslaved, and there's what was taught to those who were enslaving. Because again, they had to also be miseducated to do what they were doing. And that is what continues today. The miseducation is still there. The belief systems, studying how belief systems are passed down. That's why we're still dealing with this 150 years later.
I still believe this. I just believe that it is not incumbent upon schools to teach our children about us. I think it's incumbent upon us to teach our children about us. And the problem is that we can't teach our children about us because we don't like talking about us.
Right. And of course, you've got a comment here about, the religion. It's called the slave master religion, a version of Christianity that is steeped in white supremacy. And that is, again, just a simple statement of fact.
Well, the whole issue about this, we can talk about religion. I'm in ministry, and I deal with spirituality versus religion because I really hate religion, but I love God. So my point is that how do we get this over to our children? Oftentimes we've allowed educational institutions to attempt it, but they're not even attempted because their whole goal is not to teach us about us. So in one of our sessions, I talked about having schools for Black children, like on the weekends. Like the Jewish culture has yeshiva. Every Saturday the kids go there, learn about Jewish history, Hebrew history. But with Black folk, it's difficult to get us to want to know about us. And I'm not here to bash us. My point is, how do we solve it? We solve it by our parents telling us stories. Jackie, I recall my mother telling us stories about how they had to slip out of a sharecropper's house. I said, y'all were like escaped slaves. They said, not quite. But they said, my daddy took the man's truck just to get to the city.
Yep. And I also recall those stories not only being shared with me, but being shared with my children. So again, there's a connection because, the broader education system would make you think that is so far back that it is not connected to you.
Exactly.
That we have no connection to that at all. But it is the home education and those home stories. These are real lives. These are real experiences, real humans. So we know firsthand. But I do think that there is a broad and large misconception among the general population.
When I started talking about the justification for Black folk to be acknowledged and to have a right of, I started thinking about Black History Month. Because on Black History Month, all you talk about is who the inventors were. All the Black inventors.
Get to that point.
And I'm saying that at this
Black
point,
History Month, all we talk about MLK, Rosa Parks, and Harriet Tubman.
Well, they forget about Harriet Tubman now. On the modern ones. All right. So my point though is that we're talking about Black astronauts. We're talking about the inventor of the dry cleaning, Thomas Jennings. We're talking about, and this is just a few folk. We're talking about hundreds of Black folk who
and things that we very much still use today. I mean, so on one level, you have to ask, how could you not know? You drop your clothes off at the dry cleaners more than I do, probably. How do you not know? But they're allowed not to know.
You know how they're not knowing? Because now they own them.
Yeah, okay. Well, you need to know who invented what you're owning.
Exactly.
And maybe then that's our job, and we have to get that message out there.
Right. It's just such a task out there to make sure that our children and our children's children understand the importance of their right to equality, of their right to equality. I can go down the list of inventors, but I don't want to just deal with inventors. I really I want to deal with this process, the thought process of why we have to still say we have a right to something. The psychological process of saying, why do we still have to tell folk we got a right to it? We got a right to it. Well, versus just saying, I have a right to it, so I'm going to do what I have to do, and not asking anybody's approval.
Well, you may not, people don't not really want to hear this, but a lot of the people you have to tell that to look like you and me.
Oh, trust me, I understand that. I understand it.
But I think that's part of why we're still saying it.
Right.
I do. If we don't understand that, then we're contributing to a false narrative, and we're not just contributing, we're perpetuating it.
Yeah.
And then we perpetuate it through our behaviors.
Exactly.
If we do not study, and of course many don't, we cannot overcome what we're not studying.
Exactly.
We can't overcome a past we don't know about.
Well, guess what? We don't have to study poverty because poverty is in front of us. It's just there. But
understanding why it's there is
exactly
what we need to understand
exactly
to move past it.
Understanding the whys, and we don't many times ask the why. We just go with the acceptance of. I'll share with you that I'm just going to share this with our viewers, the ones that are on this series. This social justice series has had the lowest attendance of any live streams we've done. I know what happened though.
Right.
Because guess what?
They're not popular topics.
They're not. And people say, what y'all are talking about, they say either it's never going to happen or I ain't interested.
A lot of that.
And so my thought is that until we change how we think, we can't change our condition.
Until we understand the importance of knowing who we are. We started this by saying that, the foundation is focused on children. I mean, any child who doesn't have historical perspective or connection is a child just wandering in the wilderness. And that's what we're seeing.
Jackie, many people know that I'm also a therapist, and and I use it's called the African-centered psychotherapeutic model. And what it says is that once you have balance in your life, you have harmony, balance, authenticity, interconnectedness, and culture, then you will be okay. Guess what? That's absolutely correct. So when you talk about people healing folk and people understanding themselves, they got to understand, first of all, that some of us we have some issues. Some of us still got some problems going on, and we refuse to challenge those problems or address those problems because we've normalized it. And the normalization is, guess what? Well, we ain't gonna never get ahead. That's just black folk. And it's that defeatist attitude.
And an
Well, I don't believe.
acceptance of depression in our community,
I just don't believe
an
it.
acceptance of a lack of wellness and the things that you mentioned. Again, that's comes from believing that you're entitled to wellness and happiness and everything else you see around you.
Are looking for other people to do for you what you won't do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when we take a look at this whole thing about a right to equality, I kind of like run my life by, I don't really care what you think about me. I'm gonna go out there and do what I need to do for myself and for my people and I'm gonna let the universe take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
Are you with me? I'm not gonna worry about like what I'm gonna eat or not, because guess what? I just believe that when you do right, good things will happen,
do by you,
and you'll meet great people. You'll meet great people.
Absolutely.
Jackie, when we started the Dr. Willie Miles Children's Foundation, we started this foundation with a hope and a belief.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the Divine Creator, starting with the company years ago, very successful. If he did it then, he can do it now. Folks said, well, how are you going to do it without government? I said, excuse me? How are you going to do an agency?
The question is, how would you do it with government?
With government. Right. And I said, well, the Divine Creator gave me instructions, and he didn't tell me to ask nobody for no money, no government for no money.
That's right.
And we've been doing just fine. We're doing fine. Now, don't get me wrong. We need you all to donate to us now. But my point is, until you go out there and put yourself out there, not depending upon somebody to take care of you, you cannot have a sense of liberation.
Mm-hmm. Which again, Dr. Miles, may be why these conversations are not popular, because people are afraid to put themselves out there. People are afraid to speak up. And to that degree, perhaps they're afraid to pass this to their children. We are still in a mindset of get a good job.
That sounds like slavery. That sounds like slavery to me.
Yeah, last hired, first fired.
That sounds like slavery. I'm not knocking people who got jobs, because I know we all need them. My point, though, is that, we've traded the chains for a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. And do we have to? Do we have to trade educating our children on our history and our culture to be employed in mainstream America?
Well, Jackie, I sort of want to make this proclamation, and that is that we have a right to equality, and we don't have to prove it. Like one of our followers said, America will be nothing without us.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add that we have proven it.
Yeah.
We have proven it time and time and time again. We could not, if we literally tried to count the contributions of people of African descent to this nation, I think infinity.
Well, just help me out as I do this. Well, Emmett Till, Frederick Douglass, we proved it. George Washington Carver,
yeah,
Shirley Chisholm, Harriet Tubman.
On and on.
We proved it.
And let's come forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about, when you talk about economics, let's talk about how much the game, the industry of golf earned when who stepped on the greens? Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Okay. Now he might not self-identify as a person of color, but the reason he was such an anomaly is because they identified him as a person of color. Let's talk about our sports industries, Dr. Miles. If you're talking about America not mattering without us, sports in this country, all of them, are a major source of economics.
Yeah.
and they connect us to the rest of the world. They are one of the ways that we lead the rest of the world. So what do those industries look like without people of color? What does medicine look like without people of color? You just talked about, the invention of vaccinations for all intents and purposes. And we know about Charles Drew and countless others. I mean, really, what is America without people of color? And so then why are we still justifying and begging for the right to equality?
Well, the whole goal, and I think, I can't speak for all Black people, and I wouldn't dare do that, but I think we've always tried to coexist in peace. I think we've always tried to be humane. I think we've always tried to get along with our fellow brothers. And I'm not talking for everybody, because in every group there's going to be, some people who have some issues. But I'm talking about this title of a right to equality. I think our history has given us the right. Our history has given us the right. Our suffrage has given us the right. The lives that have been lost in the Middle Passage gives us the right. The lives that have been lost in slavery, the men who've been slaughtered, the women who've been raped, gives us the right.
Mm-hmm. And I will be honest with you, and I would welcome this. I want to sit with those who don't believe and just ask them, like, what is your thought process? Why do you feel we don't? Or just explain to me that, and then explain to me, what is it you want from people of color? Like, what do you want us to accept, that our lives don't matter? Do you want us to accept being murdered at any point? Why is this still an issue, Dr. Miles? Why haven't we moved?
We know why it's. I think we know why it's an issue, and to even get a response from those who are, I'm going to say, even against us, is,
I mean, they're emboldened now. Yeah. So explain yourself.
Well, they're not going to do that. Well, when you're privileged, you don't have to explain yourself. Your money speaks for you. So there's no having to justify yourself. True. You don't have to be morally good to anyone if you're leading the pack. And you don't have to be acceptable, because I define, based upon my power and my money, what is morally good. I define what is justified, and I define who's going to be equal.
Absolutely.
So in other words, no money, no power.
Right.
So, and that's another conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say that, it's kind of amazing. Our evening has come almost to an end, and it went very fast.
Oh, wow.
But I want to say this before we get off the air, and that is, I really want to thank all of you all for following us. I mean, this has been a privilege for Jackie and I both to do this 5-part series on social justice. And I do want to say that our t-shirts are still available. Go to our website. We'd be more than happy for you to get those. We're asking people to wear those t-shirts on the 15th, which is this coming Friday. Well, you won't have them by Friday if you've not ordered them already. And I thought it'd be nice to have them on voting day, just to see if I saw cameras with our t-shirts.
Around the country.
Yeah, that would be great. And those shirts are going to be on sale after the elections, of course. I want to say that anything that's given to us, donated to us, goes back to the community. I do want to say that, again, this is almost our ending, is that we're actually doing some funding. I'm so excited about this. Some funding in January. We are awarding 2 $500 mini grants to community groups that can do something, and we'll have an outline for you in December, on social justice. And we're hoping that it is virtual, whether it's workshops. You tell us what you want to do, and we will actually look at what you're having to offer, and we're going to make it without all the red tape, and you don't need to show us anything other than your plan. And I'm sorry,
I hope that our listeners are able to, help us identify, deserving programs and things in the community where this would have impact, where mini grants would have impact. And again, without all the hoops to jump through, all the forms, all the, paperwork.
Yeah, and we're also awarding 5 $200 scholarships, not scholarships, mini grants to, I say students, but it can be anyone who are YouTubers, who can actually who develop YouTube videos like 3 to 5 minutes, a little bit longer, on social justice, dealing with any social justice issue. So you'll have an opportunity to get the specifications of what we're wanting. We're not asking for a whole lot. We realize that this money is not a whole lot, but it is something to start igniting the conversation. If you want to give to us to help us actually fund this, hey, that'd be great. We look forward to receiving your donations. However, as funds come in, we'll increase the kind of funding. But Jackie, I'm just really so excited that as a new organization who does not receive, it's not receiving any government funds at this point, is able
that we're looking forward to
actually
supporting others.
Exactly. Just a community work starting January 2021. Again, our time is up. Jackie, you've been absolutely wonderful as a co-host with me. I look forward to seeing you. I think we're going to take next week off. I think I'm kind of tired at this point.
Okay.
But next week we'll take off.
Take a break.
And we'll start back up the week after with some very exciting topics, dealing with children and children and families, but primarily topics that deal with how to make our children more empowered and to make sure that we're saving a generation. All right, you've been wonderful, Jackie. I want to thank the audience for taking time out every Tuesday for being with us. You've been absolutely wonderful. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.